let's go to business. And one business we're talking about today is taxing for development. The Corporate Affairs Commission recently posted that less than 20 million out of 68 million active businesses in Nigeria are active taxpayers. Nigeria has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratio in the world, just about 3.6% as at 2019. And although Nigeria also raised 3.4% of GDP from non-tax revenues, such as oil, in the same year. Now, the Senate has passed for second reading a bill to amend the Federal Inland Revenue Service Act. The proposed law is supposed to regulate the processes of granting corporate tax holidays, import duty waivers, and investment incentives to investors and businesses in Nigeria. Can this make a difference to this low GDP or tax to GDP number that we have in the country? We have Dr. Vincent Ahonsi, is the country director of Oxfam, joining us from our Abuja studio. Good morning, Dr. Ahonsi. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me here.
All right. So what are your initial thoughts about this attempt by the Senate to, reduce the power of the federal government in giving out waivers and tax holidays? Will this really boost, will it expand the tax nets? Will it expand the revenue of government from tax, do you think?
Thank you so much. We need to look at this. This is not the Senate. I am not speaking for the Senate, but I do not see it as the Senate trying to whittle down the power of the government in giving out tax rebates and tax incentives. But we need to look at the background. What is the context of Nigeria? About 3 months ago, the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper were presented to the Senate Committee on Finance. And in that document, the Honorable Minister of Finance made it known that the proposed budget for 2023 is going to be in the region of 19.7 trillion naira. And out of that, over 12 trillion naira are going to be by deficit. Simply put, that they are going to be by borrowing. Nigeria does not have the money. And out of that 12 trillion or over 12 trillion, 6 trillion are going to finance petroleum subsidy. Another over 6 trillion are going to be for tax incentives, tax waivers, import duty waivers. If you look at that, one, the volume of money that Nigeria is going to lose by giving tax incentives is so mind-blowing. And for a country that is already losing an estimated $2.9 billion US on yearly basis to tax waivers, to corporations, to tax holidays, to tax incentives to wealthy Nigerians, this is a welcome development. Nigeria is currently having serious financial and fiscal issues. We cannot run away from it. And what the Senate has said is that you cannot continue to give tax incentives. These are the tax revenues that Nigeria need, with a tax to GDP ratio of just about 3.6 for the year 2019. Nigeria has one of the lowest in the world, if not the lowest. And we are now saying that let Nigerian government stop giving these tax incentives to the rich and to the powerful, to the corporations. These are revenues you need in a country where over 20 million children are out of school. Less than 40% of the population have access to quality health care. This is not the way to go. Our food system is broken. Now, over 19 million Nigerians are acutely food insecure.
All right, Dr. Ahonsi.
So giving tax incentives is not the way to go.
All right, Dr. Ahonsi, I believe, in the corporate world, we certainly have to look for a balance, because these tax holidays and waivers are also supposed to encourage investments in corporates. These are the guys who create the jobs. These are the guys who also bring the revenue. So it's not like they were just being given for nothing. The tax waivers and holidays and tax holidays were actually created to encourage corporates to come on board in the country, create jobs, mop up unemployment, also encourage them to also, have their production and reduce production costs for them. So I believe there's a need for a balance somewhere in there.
Unfortunately, the context is not what we are seeing. The spirit behind that legislation, so to speak, is that when these incentives are given to the corporations, they come back again with whatever they have gained or profit and plunge it back into the system in terms of financing education, financing healthcare, financing agriculture, and financing social protection. But that is not what we're getting. That is one leg of it. The gains they are getting from these tax incentives are not being plugged back into the social good, into common good. That is one leg of the argument. The other one is that the system is not transparent. The Senate has not said anything that is a big deal here. They say for you to request for a tax incentive or a tax holiday or a tax waiver, you need to come forward in a transparent manner. Provide the justification for it. Let Nigerian populace, through the instrument of the legislature, be able to scrutinize what you are requesting for. Nigerians will be able to say, okay, through the legislature again, whether this is legitimate, whether this is appropriate, whether this is something that could be granted. Not what we have now that is quite hidden, quote and unquote, and it is not open to scrutiny and it's open to my practices. We cannot say for certainty that these are the people being given these tax incentives, which they propose to amount to about 6 trillion naira. That is a lot of money. And the Senate say, okay, throw it open. We want this to be scrutinized. We want it to pass through legislative, scrutiny, approval before the executive goes ahead and implement it. And that is very legitimate. You cannot continue to have the top 1% continue to feed fat on the bottom 99%. The system will not just work well.
Yeah,
there's no country that continues to... yes, please.
So from what you have said, I mean, one can say, what's the assurance that the introduction of another layer of scrutiny, being the legislature, is going to bring transparency, to the system? Because we live in Nigeria and we've seen or heard at least processes that have a lot of bureaucracy and still is not transparent. I mean, even when we talk about constituency projects, which comes from the legislature, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. So what is the assurance that with another layer of scrutiny or bureaucracy, it's not just going to be another party to settle? Shouldn't it be, maybe a law that will affirm or compel the corporates to follow through with what they have promised to do?
The argument is quite legitimate, but I will let you know that one thing that we need to think of here, as stakeholders, we do not see this legislation or this proposed bill as the end to the mean. It is not the end, it's the beginning. We want to see a situation where there will be a total cessation, a total phasing out of tax incentives. So it's not a case of this is going to be the end. This is the beginning. Just the same stamina, the same energy that the government is putting towards phasing out, fuel subsidy is the same energy we expect the government to put towards phasing out tax incentives, because it only goes to a few, top 1%. So opening it up for the legislation to be able to scrutinize it is a transition, is a work in progress. We do not see it as something that is going to, it's better than where we are coming from, where you and I cannot really say those who receive these tax incentives, what they receive it for and what they use it for, and we cannot see what they are doing with the gains from those tax incentives. Nigerians are not getting better for it. Nigerians are getting poorer for it. We have 133 million Nigerians now that are in the poverty bracket. That is not the way to go. For a country where we say by 2025, we are going to have poverty and we are going to eradicate hunger, I don't see that happening in the next 3 years. We have to start thinking forward. Nigeria cannot continue to borrow money to refinance its debt service, and at the same time thinking that borrowing will take us out of what we have. You told us the country is rich. Thank you. But for those of us who are lucky and who are fortunate to be educated, we know there are problems. There is no good prospects for our fiscal responsibility and our fiscal space for years and years to come. What we are going to bequeath on our children and our children's children is going to be an unhealthy economic and fiscal environment. And the way to start to prime down that, one, is to see how we could widen the taxation space, how we could have more of production, how we could have less of consumption, how we could have more of innovation in ICT. That is the way to go. As of present, the only tax that Nigeria is able to track or is able to capture is just about 12% of accruable tax. Why can't we widen the gap? Now we have over 4,960 Nigerians whose assets and wealth is about or over $5 million US. We have about 450 Nigerians with more than $50 million US. And we have Nigerians who have more than $1 billion US. All we are saying is, why can't we think inwards? One, apply a wealth tax of 2% to Nigerians who have over $5 million US. Apply 5% wealth tax annually to Nigerians who have over $50 million US. And apply 10% annual wealth tax to Nigerians who have over $1 billion in assets. Then we will be raising over $6 billion US from that alone. And if you are able to plug the loopholes that we have in these tax incentives, that will save Nigeria another $2.9 billion estimate. And from both of them, we are talking about close to almost 7 point something billion US already. These are the revenues that the country needs. Then we have to look at our income tax, our corporate income tax. We think that one is good at 30%, but personal income tax still needs to go up for the top flight earners. To at least about 28% or 30%, which is the average for other West African countries. So Dr. this is the way to go, my sister.
All right, Dr. Vincent Ahonsi. Obviously, Oxfam has been doing a lot of calculation and strategizing on taxation in Nigeria, and tax management remains a big deal for the country. But as you have noted earlier, one of the biggest challenges in the system is transparency. So even when we have all the calculations, getting people to be transparent or getting the system to be transparent remains a challenge and a bottleneck to achieving all of those numbers you have noted. But thank you so much, Dr. Vincent Ahonsi, Country Director of Oxfam, for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.